The problem right now is that they've actually frozen the IDR programs, which is the income repayment program, directly based on your income, right? So that's a good thing. If you were making more money 4 or 5 years ago and your payment was $100, you're making less money today, they might knock your payment down to $50.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, are the walls now tumbling down? That's the question. If there is a theme song, my next guest thinks that should be it for today. Paul Oster, betterqualified.com. Paul, so you're the credit expert. Two things: 50 basis point cut in the Fed funds rate and new student loan rules on forbearance. Does it matter? Is it too late? Does anybody really care? What do you think? How do you think it's affecting your clients? And you have a lot of them who will be affected by it.
Yeah. So unfortunately, this first cut is not going to, even make a dent for the average consumer. A lot of people were hoping that they would directly impact mortgage interest rates, which is really, has had the housing market kind of paralyzed for a couple of years here. But it's indirectly tied to the mortgage interest rate. Most banks had already had it baked in, expecting that 50 point basis cut. So those are unchanged. What it does start to change is our credit card interest rate will drop a little bit. That's always a good thing. I tell people all the time, even though the interest rate drops and your payment, the minimum amount due may drop, you should continue to make the higher payments, even if it's only a couple of bucks more. That is how you're going to accelerate getting out of debt. So if you kind of just follow this thing down, hopefully they make at least one more rate cut before the end of the year. Your credit card interest rates will drop again. Your minimum payments will drop again. But if you can afford to keep making those higher payments, it's kind of an easy way to just start to pay down your principal balances. So certainly a good thing. Hopefully the trend continues in a downward motion. The Fed certainly seems to be pointing in that direction. So that's always a good thing.
Okay. Well, it definitely looks like rates are coming down more. The dollar is going down, right? All these things that are happening. Yep. What's a good rule of thumb for let's just say if rates come down half a point, maybe you should up your payments to match the rate cut?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just look at what your existing payment was, the last couple of billing cycles, and just try and maintain those payments. Look, if you're struggling to make those payments in the first place, you might want to reach out to a credit management company, a credit counseling company, and try and get into a credit management program where these companies leverage the credit card companies, the creditors, by having pools and lots of people where they say, hey, listen, Paul Oster can no longer afford to make these minimum payments. We have to maybe lower his interest rate to zero. Obviously, the cards are frozen and sometimes canceled during these types of programs. But again, the overall goal is to get out of credit card debt. Even though the rates came down a little bit, the average is still close to 20%. And people on the higher end of the spectrum are paying close to 30% interest on that debt. It's really, really difficult to pay off debt at 30% interest.
Right. I see your point. Like you can never get out from under that. So when you've got carrying all these balances, what is the best way to pay them down in a systematic fashion that gives you the most benefit? How do you do that?
So there's a couple of different options. The two most popular, one is called the avalanche, where you're focusing on one credit card with the highest interest rate at a time. So if you have an extra $50 a month, you don't split that between 2 or 3 cards and pay them all down. It's actually a psychological thing. It makes people feel great. I paid down 3 or 4 cards more than the minimum payment that was due. Mathematically speaking, the best way to do this is to take that entire $50, apply it towards the card with the highest interest rate until that's paid off. So obviously, hopefully, you're not continuing to add onto the balances while you're trying to pay them down. It's kind of counterproductive. The other way is called the snowball method, where you're going to try and roll up the accounts with the lowest balances and get them out of the way. It's a great psychological win for people to have a card paid off in full. Obviously, you need to put that card away so you do not use it anymore. Mm-hmm. But both of those will work, okay? The idea is that you're making the minimum payments on all the other cards. Focus on one, whether it's the lowest balance or the highest interest rate, and then you move on to the next card. Do not open any new cards. Do not close any of those cards. Believe it or not, closing a credit card can have a serious negative impact on 45% of your overall credit score. It's the combination of your utilization ratio, which is the difference between your balances and credit limits, and your credit history. So unfortunately, the moment that you close a credit card, you've now lost all of the credit history associated with that card. So it could skew all of the averages for the other cards, and you will now have lost whatever available credit you had on that card. So the idea for the utilization ratio is to keep that number 30% or below. So if you have a balance of, if you have a credit limit of $1,000, you would never want the balance on that card to be above 30%. The other option, and this is still a really good option, but it comes with a tremendous amount of trepidation and hesitation, because if you use a 0% balance transfer option, it will work, right? We were talking before how difficult it is to pay off debt at 30%. So they're giving you the option to transfer a balance to a new card and pay it off at 0%. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if you haven't figured this thing out mathematically, if you do not pay it off in 18, 24 months, you will now have cost yourself that much more money because you paid a transfer fee somewhere between 2 and 5%, and you get hit with all of the deferred interest. So it's really like, credit card sabotage. You do not want to sabotage yourself. So if you're going to do a 0% transfer, just make sure mathematically and somewhat confidently that you're going to be able to pay off the balance in that time frame.
Yeah. Okay. So you got to have a plan. Most importantly, right? You got to have a plan.
Yep. And then for these, for the younger people and sometimes older people, September 30th, it will be a really tough day for 30 million student loan borrowers. 30 million. And the problem is that we have been somewhat coddled for the past 4 years. They've used deferments, they've used forbearances, they've used this ramp up period. And that was all a good thing during the pandemic. But we need to get back to business here. We need to get back to people being held accountable for the monies that they borrowed. And you have to come up with a payment plan. So unfortunately, if you've waited and you haven't gone to studentaid.gov, by the way, there's only one website and one website only that borrowers should or have to go to, studentaid.gov. Don't answer solicitations via text message, social media, phone calls, commercials. Go to studentaid.gov and you will be able to figure out a plan that can help you pay off your student loan. The problem right now is that they've actually frozen the IDR programs, which is the income repayment program, directly based on your income, right? So that's a good thing. If you were making more money 4 or 5 years ago and your payment was $100, you're making less money today, they might knock your payment down to $50, $25. Right. But again, right now, those programs have actually been frozen until they figure out. There's all sorts of, unfortunately, this has become a political hot potato football. It's getting kicked back and forth. And the borrowers are left holding the bag, so to speak. So no one understands really what's going on. But there have been some actual Supreme Court injunctions. And this is a matter of the courts at this point in time. So we have to wait to see how those are going to play out. But in the interim, it is imperative, if you have a student loan and you anticipate struggling making these payments coming September 30th, you have to take some proactive steps right now. Don't wait, because if everybody tries to do it at once, it's just not going to be as beneficial for the people that get involved sooner than later. So be proactive. Go to studentaid.gov. Figure out what you're going to be able to, be qualified for and approved for. As of September 30th, and this might be the biggest piece of what's going to happen, if you miss a payment now before September 30th, most of the time they were not reporting it to the credit bureaus.
Oh, really?
Okay. After September 30th, if you go 30 days late, which means you have a payment due today, 26th. If you paid in a couple days, they're now reinstating late fees, by the way. But that's not a 30-day late payment. That won't get reported to the credit bureaus. If I failed to make the payment before October 26th, that's a 30-day late payment. And that can easily drop your scores 50 to 100 points, which then in turn costs you more money for every other financial transaction.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, well, I'm glad that we had you on here to clarify that, because that could be a real bad mistake. And then try to get it off your report once it's reported by the federal government. That's probably like the hardest one to get off, huh?
Yeah, I mean, especially if they're federal student loans, they're excluded from bankruptcy. There's no way out from under paying back those student loans. If they're private, you have a little bit more wiggle room. But they're they're coming after the borrowers and saying, listen, you've had plenty of time to figure this out. The pause started back in March of 2020, believe it or not. It's just amazing. Here we are 4 years later. So people, and I sympathize with them. I empathize with them. I feel bad for them. But you borrowed the money, and now you've had 4 years to try and figure out how you're going to start making those monthly payments. So it started back. It's been going on for almost a year now. They reinstated it back in September, October of 23, but there was a ramp up period. There were still some built-in flexibilities where they weren't penalizing the borrowers. That all goes away on the 30th. So I hate to be the doomsayer. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's really imperative that, your listeners and viewers understand what's going to happen on the 30th.
Yep. And hey, like you said, they had 4 years to figure this thing out. It should have been enough time. The interest that they haven't paid that continued to build up on these loans, they owe this, right? So the balance just gotten higher.
Absolutely. And there's lots of other things that are going to change, but, we could talk about it for days. That's why I always direct people to go to studentaid.gov, start plugging your information in there. A lot of students don't even realize what kind of loan they have. There are different kinds of products, loans, but most borrowers don't even understand what kind of financing and loans that they took out. So figure that out first and foremost. Be very proactive with the servicer, which might not be the bank who loaned you the money. There are big servicers out there. If you think of SallieMae.com, they're one of the biggest for sure. You have to reach out to them. They can help you figure this out also, but you're much better off going to studentaid.gov.
Got it. Studentaid.gov. That's the go-to place you want to be. And better qualified if you got questions or need information or need some assistance managing your credit and your credit score, right? It's one and the same. And right, betterqualified.com. Is there a phone number they can call you at?
You know what, Kerry? Because there is, and I'll give the phone number out, but more importantly, because most people don't want to call anybody, so we have a texting platform, and now is a really good time to contact us because we launched our artificial intelligence, our AI-driven credit reporting service about a year and a half ago. This thing it's a work of art. I've been doing this for 20 years. This is by far the greatest thing we've done for our clients because, well, kind of what you were saying before, it's all tied together. And the reason that people are in the position they're in, if they have lower credit scores, if they have credit card debt, is because they didn't have a plan. They have no idea how much gas is left in the tank. They have no idea. Yeah. They basically live in a crisis mode every 30 days. So you have to be able to plug all this stuff in. And you can do that with we call it BI, Better Intelligence, but it's an AI-driven credit report that can tell you, check this out. We have pay down dates. It will tell you in the billing cycle, the exact amount, the exact day on what credit card you should pay to get the highest jumps in your credit scores. That's really, really important when you're talking about financing a new card, applying for any type of financing. There's not another credit report in the world that does it, by the way. So that pay down date is really, really important for us and our clients. Wow. And the other thing is that all of the creditors are plugged into this now, and we can communicate with your creditors directly and electronically. So we're getting results within days as opposed to waiting weeks and months for the credit bureaus, which are terrible, right? By the way. So we don't have to wait for them anymore. We're going directly to the creditors through this electronic dispute portal. And it really has changed the wait time and the turnaround time. It's in days. So if you're gonna send a text message to the number 40691, send a text message to the number 40691, and your message is BI, like AI, but ours is Better Intelligence. So your message is BI, you text that to 40691. The consultation and analysis is absolutely free. I can't stress that enough.
Okay, sounds great. Hey, got a question for Paul or myself. Just shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, and the link to Paul's site is in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Just click it, take you right to his site. You could get started. And while you're there, please sign up for a free newsletter. Paul, always a pleasure. And we will talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for having me back on, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.